The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Our podcast is hosted by Mesa Chamber of Commerce CEO Sally Harrison. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business podcast.
Hi, my name is Sally Harrison. I'm the president and CEO of the Mesa Chamber. And today in the podcast studio, we have Neal Carter with us, one of the candidates that we have recently endorsed at the Chamber. Welcome.
Hi, it's good. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you for having me.
course. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your background before you became involved in politics.
I remember from high school reading Julius Caesar, and there's a quote about, I'm going to modify the quote, about some men are born into politics, some choose politics, and some have politics thrust upon them.
And yours was?
I was appointed. So Representative Frank Pratt, God rest his soul, had passed away a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the Pinal County Board of Supervisors had appointed me to his seat.
Okay.
I live in Pinal County, but the district does include part of Mesa. It includes
Okay.
the East Mark area around the airport. The airport's in District 15,
Uh-huh.
as well as all of Queen Creek and Santan Valley, where I live.
So that's a big district.
It's a big district, although the old district was the size of Connecticut. So it's a lot smaller
so
than it
redistricting
was.
did not help you, maybe.
Well, no, it's a lot smaller than it was. But
Oh, it's smaller now.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a lot smaller.
Okay. So what did you have before then?
Before, Santan Valley was lumped in with Globe and Casa Grande
Oh,
and
gosh.
Oracle and Florence Coolidge and all of that.
That's huge.
Yeah, so it's a lot more rural. Now it's a
Yeah.
lot more suburban.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you like it better?
It's certainly better on my old 80s truck. To me, it's about service. So it's about serving the people. And I think probably the interests of where I live, which is more or less a commuter area and a suburb, align better with the new district than they do with some of the rural or mining
Sure.
interests that the old district had.
Okay.
So,
So you came in after Frank passed. And so why are you running again?
well, like I say, for me, it's all about being of service to the community.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe I'm doing a good job. When I had started, there were several issues that were facing our area. I think the number one thing is transportation.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
feel like to some extent our transportation priorities were ignored in preference for other interests.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there were plans, and there still are plans, although the funding's tied up, I think, for a north-south corridor freeway. It was supposed to connect from the Gold Canyon area down to Eloy, and that would relieve I-10, and it would relieve some of the other freeways like 101 and so on if you're traveling north-south. Provide another corridor to Tucson from Scottsdale, for example, right? So
Right.
it would relieve a lot of traffic. And I can remember that our preferred alignment was 6 miles west of where it wound up being, because the state land department wanted to put it on state trust land, which increases their value.
Sure.
So I can remember at the time feeling that the needs of our community were not necessarily effectively represented because transportation projects like that were being moved farther from the community. So things like this, it's important to have a strong voice, I think.
Mhm.
And Mesa's kind of blessed because there's so many legislators from Mesa.
Yes.
But then, of course, Mesa's such a diverse place that there's different interests represented and different
Sure.
populations. So
Yeah. Well, transportation is obviously a very big focus for the business community, just to be able to move things around, right?
And we've been doing pretty well, I think, in the last several sessions. We did
Mhm.
secure funding to put the interchanges into State Route 24,
Mm-hmm.
which is in Mesa, as
Yep.
you know. Sometimes I find that people are surprised to know how far Mesa goes to the Pinal County
It's
line.
huge.
Yeah. So State Route 24 currently has signals on it. Doesn't have the interchanges at Signal Butte, at Charisma, and at Williams Field. And we also secured funding to continue it further east as well. So that's sort of an East Mesa project
Mhm.
that's ongoing.
Yeah.
I've been working with the city councilman, Scott Summers, who,
District 6.
yes,
Mhm.
was interested, or he had told me that some of the residents are looking for a sound wall for State Route 24,
Mm.
which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I drafted a bill last year to ask for some funding for that. That
Mhm.
wasn't ultimately included in the budget, but my plan is to go back and ask for that again.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So.
So talk about your other priorities. I mean, transportation sounds like one.
Transportation, I would rate for our district. I would rate at the top. I
Mhm.
think that's probably the most important thing for the residents where I live, East Mesa, but also, I live in Santan Valley. I have to make the commute too. I mean, I live there too, so I'm on the freeway just like you are. So I would rate that as number one.
That is my district too.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, I live in front, so north of Apple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So other priorities, like I said, that would probably be the number one priority. One of the big priorities right now is affordability, both of housing, but also of other essential items. I say other items meaning things like groceries and so on. We at the legislature, the Republican majority, had drafted a bill to eliminate the grocery tax. It's a very regressive tax. We're one of the only states in the nation that taxes groceries or permits it. And we were looking at that as a way to relieve some of the pressure on purchasing power for families and things, because food isn't really a luxury.
Not so much.
So that was one thing. That was vetoed by the governor. So affordability of food and also housing, I think, is probably another thing that really affects our district.
Yep.
People are moving farther and farther out because it's more affordable.
Right.
And so to the extent that we can save money, it's better.
Yeah. Well, and District 6, where we have all the larger employers with, workforce needs. So, it'd be nice to be able to have people live a little closer to where they're working. Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously today's political world is very divisive, to say the least. Talk about that. What are your thoughts on that?
I've been told that from people who have been around longer than I am that it has gotten, in a sense, worse in the sense that there's more polemics. I attribute some of that to social media and some other things. I think the main thing is that if we are going to craft good policy, we should listen to one another. We should be available for open lines of communication is probably number one thing. So I'm always available. You can reach me on my website. You can reach me at the legislative email address. In fact, I just put on a giant barbecue for the town, which we do periodically in Santan Valley, and people talk to me there. I'm always happy to meet for coffee, or if you want to. I think working across the aisle really means having respect for your colleagues, listening, and you'll find that there's more common ground than people think. This last session, I was the chairman of Ways and Means Committee. There's no guarantee that I will be next time, but this last session I was, and I would call every member of the majority, every member on my committee, and I would call the ranking Democrat member, because he would call his members, right?
Sure.
So I didn't need to reach out to them individually, but I would call every single one of them every week. So both parties, right?
Yep.
Republican or Democrat, they're on my committee. We
Good
call
communication.
them and tell them, hey, this is what we're going to hear. Do you have questions, concerns, anything to do with the bill? And I think that works well because a lot of the times people have concerns with something that are easily addressed or easily fixed. I can remember a couple of years ago we were working on a bill for involving incorporation for Santan Valley, and at the time, HOAs and home builders, basically declarant controlled HOAs, which means home builders, were allowed to effectively veto an incorporation effort, and that had stymied one of the efforts before. And in talking to them, so of course the impetus, the popular thrust of opinion was, well, we should just eliminate that. But in talking with the home builders, what we realized was they're just worried that a new city will turn around and increase impact fees while their project is ongoing that they already secured funding for, which is legitimate.
Sure.
And so rather than having an opportunity to quash the whole effort, we had drafted the law to say, look, that you can just opt out of it. You can opt out of the map. You have a 6-month period. And they're like, that's great. Yeah, it's fine. So we're able to achieve the goal that we wanted, which was an incorporation effort that could go forward, but also protect their financial interests and so on. Kind of a compromise. So it's that kind of thing where if you just if you sit down, I'm big into stakeholder meetings, a whole lot of stakeholder meetings, particularly about tax things, because I'm the tax chairman, Ways and Means. But anytime there's something that looks like it'll be controversial, I think that's the way to go.
Sounds like a very smart plan. A little communication goes a long way.
I would say so. I mean,
Well, what do you think the top priorities are, top issues for the state are?
For the state, so we talked about some of my top issues and some of the, which I would say are synonymous with the district, right? The top issues of the district being transportation, affordable housing, and so on. But statewide, those things are important too, of course. But I would say that water is a big statewide concern right now.
Always.
And there are other things. Water, though, is interesting. Every year there's work that's being done on it. There has been a lot of progress. For example, as some of you may know, they've been mapping the aquifer and doing different things. There was a bill that was an interesting one last session called the Ag to Urban Bill. I find when I'm out and about talking to people, there's always a misconception surrounding water. I think that people think of water like they think of gasoline, like there's a drop or a gallon of gasoline, you burn it up and it's gone. The reality, of course, with water is that it's a cycle, and so it can be recharged and reused and so on. And one of the things is that agriculture, particularly if you're doing field flooding for alfalfa or something, can be using as much as an acre foot a year per acre. There's about 330,000 gallons. So it's a little known fact that if you build 4 houses per acre, given that the average American's using about 80 or 90 gallons a day, you're saving on water. As long as you're converting from flood irrigation alfalfa to housing, it's actually less water use. Plus, a lot of the water is recaptured when it goes down the drain. I was just at the EPCOR, I'm in the EPCOR service area. They just opened a sewer reclamation plant, and I just toured it last week because it's new.
In Santana area?
Yes.
Okay.
And they are recapturing more than 90%. So by recapture, I mean that they recharge the aquifer, right? So they clean the water and then they pump it down. It goes back into the ground. So that's incredible, right? Because of course that means that really when you have water come out of your tap and go down the drain, most of it is recycled in a sense, right?
That's 90% is a big number,
right? So there was an Ag to Urban Bill, and it was intended to encourage. One of the problems was that if you wanted to develop your farm, for example, you'd go to the end of the line for a water permit, right, and then have to sort of hash it out with everybody else's prior rights and so on, and then it discourages what in the end would be a water savings. So the Ag to Urban Bill was passed. I do believe that was vetoed as well because of concerns surrounding the Gila River Indian community. I'm sure that that'll come back probably this year, and the governor and the community and the legislature can work on that. But there is some movement around water every year, and I think that's probably, other than transportation and some of the other things, one of the state's biggest concerns.
Okay. Well, how do you balance representing your local interests with the interests of the state at large? I mean, that's got to be a little bit of a juggling act sometimes.
It comes back to communication again. I think what you do is you talk to your colleagues and for me, politics is the art of the possible. That's what I would say. And so, of course, funding is limited for things. So you have to choose, are we going to extend State Route 24 or widen I-10 or both? And if so, what are we not going to choose? It is a system that's been around for over 100 years with 90 people kind of hashing it out. So I do think it has been working, but it's mostly a compromise, I think. And then what you'll find is that what's good for the state is good for the local community too, in the long run.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that.
Well,
I think.
We do have a big election coming up, which I think a lot of people are paying attention to the bigger picture instead of local, which I think local's every bit as important, but
I think more important.
You hear a lot about national. What role do local races play?
So the national politics kind of sucks the air out of the room, in my opinion. Everybody watches debates. I hear about people. There's just a vice presidential debate. I hear about people angry with Congress. And I think most of us are. Congress seems dysfunctional to me, but. And so that becomes the focus. But the problem is this. If you stop and you think about it for a minute, the local politics has a far greater effect on your life than the national does.
Right.
The speed limit that you're required to drive is local. Inheritance laws are local. Divorce laws are local. whether there's a tax on your groceries, like I said, is local. All kinds of stuff is local, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to pay attention to that. For example, several years ago, there was a drive to increase teacher pay. To some extent, there's always a drive to increase teacher pay. A little known fact, I actually was a substitute for Coolidge Unified years ago.
Really?
It was like $110 a day, which is 18 grand a year if you multiply out by the weeks of school year. So don't get me wrong, there's a need there. But what people forget is the local school districts set the pay for the individual teachers. The legislature doesn't sign a contract with the teacher. The district signs a contract with the teacher. The legislature simply funds the district.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important, in other words, who you elect to the district, right? Your school district races really matter because that's going to have a direct impact on teacher pay and what they prioritize. And it's the same, of course, with city council races and obviously with the legislature and anything in between, really, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I've seen what's to come in the mail, right? I think early ballots are in a couple of days. It's a little scary to think that the pamphlet, the what we're going to be having to look through is so long, and that I would think most people don't get past a couple of pages, right? Or really pay attention to the stuff that's like the different initiatives.
You're referring to ballot initiatives,
yeah,
right? Mm-hmm.
That makes it kind of tough because they're so important, and I just don't think people even get to that point sometimes, or B, that they understand what they're looking at when they do get there.
We need to be involved, of course, and civic involvement and voting is a responsibility, so you have to educate yourself, and I'm available if people want to talk to me, but of course there's ample resources, like you said, in the pamphlet and online and so on, and then to think critically and read critically what you're receiving. But there's a reason it's long this year. There's two ways you can get something on the ballot. You can collect signatures, which is the case for some of them, and the legislature can refer some things to the ballot too. When you have divided government, as we do, so we have a Republican-controlled legislature and Democrat governor, you tend to see more things referred to the ballot because it's a way of getting things accomplished that maybe weren't signed into law.
Mm-hmm.
So we've referred a border security initiative that's going to be on the ballot. And I'm trying to think, just like you say, there's so many.
So much. Well, just Mesa. I mean, we have 4 really important questions that the Chamber has supported. Hopefully people are reading and understanding what they're reading, because they really could be pretty detrimental to our community if they don't get passed. I think there's way more than that, obviously, but people just need to be aware, and if they don't understand what they're reading, they need to reach out to people like you, or somebody in their community that could explain it to them.
When it comes to the Mesa stuff, I will be honest with you. I'm not as informed as maybe I ought to be, because I don't live in Mesa, right?
Sure.
But I agree with you 100%.
There's a lot to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you want to leave us with? I mean, you've got a race going.
I do. So there is a race. You have a choice. I'm running. Michael Way is running, and Barbara Benetone is running for 2 seats. So two of the 3 of us will ultimately serve. I would ask for your vote. Like I said, if you have questions, please reach out to me. My website's www.neal. It's Neal. It's the handle my 11 parents gave me. I can't answer for the spelling. NealCarter Arizona. So nealcarterarizona.com. My cell phone number's on there. So honestly, give me a call. People do. It's fine. We can sit down and chat if you want. And you can kind of see some of the things that are important to me.
Great.
And yeah, I would say get involved. Please. Not just vote, but get involved. Yeah. Consider running for school board or something too.
Yeah.
We need people at all levels.
Yeah, those are very important seats. Well, thanks for being here this morning.
It's
Appreciate
a pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.